Well, welcome everybody, and we're on to April's online program for the SCHC alumni. And this month, we're going to take as our topic the stigma of addiction. One of the fellows here recently was telling me he just, pretty much completed the program, and he says, Geoff, I'm still stuck with this. I can't forgive myself for all these things I did in my active addiction. Robbed from my parents, lied to them, manipulated my family, and I just can't get over it. And I asked him, well, have you discovered that basically, as William S. Burroughs said, no one ever wants to be an addict, but that somehow some of us get trapped in it. And he's like, yeah, I understand all that, but I still, I still feel so much embarrassment and shame. Yeah, it's a toughie. No question about it. This whole stigma of addiction, which is just so pervasive in our society, and it really doesn't matter where you look. I mean, everywhere. To borrow a phrase from Monty Python, you can't swing a dead cat without hearing that addicts are defective people, sinners, immoral, horrible fathers or mothers or horrible parents, horrible lovers. I mean, everywhere we look, the commercial film industry uses addicts as an example of the dark side of life. So even though all the professionals on the one hand are saying it's a health condition, or if you remember your time at Sunshine Coast, we call it a response to a meaningless, monotonous, and boring life. Even though we have all this professional opinion out there, still, people today have internalized this idea that there's something wrong with them, that they are defective human beings. And brought up by this young fellow who still cannot forgive himself for the things he did in active addiction. But this stigma is so pervasive that some of the finest researchers in the field have noticed this and tried to do something about it. Here's a manual that Dr. Stephen Hayes sent to us. He's designed an entire treatment program for addicts just to help them overcome the stigma. Just to show you just that people today realize this kind of thing. Or here's a book by the famous scientist Carlton Erickson, famous addiction scientist. And even says here, there are some people who've been emotionally, physically, and financially affected by other people's drinking and drugging. They are loath to let them off by saying, well, they couldn't help it, right? And that's this book, and on and on. Stanton Peele, another fellow, says the same thing. In fact, he says the stigma of addiction is doing much more harm than good. In fact, according to Dr. Peele, is actually promoting it. Promoting the addiction in our society. So lots of people are very concerned about this, and we know from research that this is very true. Here's one little example. There's a famous program, I think it's done mainly in the United States, called the Victim Impact Panel. And it's sponsored by Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And the logic of this is if you get caught with a DUI, the court sentences you to attend this VIP, this Victim Impact Panel. And they're very upfront about it. They said, no, this is not intended to shame you or anything. All we're going to do is we're having a few family members, and they're going to tell you what it's like to lose a loved one from someone who was hit by a drunk driver. And so there's no singling anyone out, no pointing fingers, they just tell their stories. Well, interestingly enough, the researchers, these ones from, I believe they're from the University of New Mexico, actually studied how successful the VIP program was and discovered that if the court ordered someone to attend the VIP program, their chances of getting another DUI were significantly increased, which to everybody would sound, well, how could that be? Well, the reason is that all that the VIP panel did was it increased the stigma felt by the people sitting in the room. So these are very good lessons for us to understand. And we do know from studies of people, for example, recovering from cancer versus recovering from addiction, that the ones recovering from addiction seem to be at a disadvantage and with a lot tougher recovery because of the stigma attached to the addiction. And we also know, for example, that lots of people do not ask for help specifically because they may be afraid of losing their driver's license or being fired from their job, or if there's any problems in the family, maybe they'll lose their kids. And these are all very real concerns to people. So a lot of people don't ask for help right from the beginning. And these are all very sad things that hopefully in time things will change. Anyway, this program this month is to give you some understanding if you've been affected by the stigma of addiction, and then what to do about it. And our first week is always to give some thought to, is this problem affecting you? Have you actually internalized the stigma of addiction? Do you believe that you are defective, that you should have known better? Or that, oh, I don't know, I'm too smart to be an addict, or I had, nothing bad happened to me in my childhood, how could I possibly be an addict? There must be something wrong with me. So we've, as usual, we've set up some things on the online program for you to think about. But the key is here, and I would encourage you to take some time to understand whether or not deep down you're like the young fellow who just talked to me short time ago about, Geoff, I understand it's a medical condition, I understand there's this brain chemistry component, I understand all this, I understand I never asked to be an addict, but darn it, I did it, so there must be something wrong with me, because I couldn't possibly have, I got to be defective, right? Otherwise this would never have happened. And think about whether in some part of you that this is true, whether you still hold on to this stigma. Anyway, as always, it's on the online program. You can answer out the 3 little questions there, send them on in, and we'll talk to you next week.